So, getting comfortable talking about our trauma, our oppression, our abuse, our stress, what makes us feel weak is important because when we talk about it, we're not going to hold it in and it explodes later and we end up in the hospital. Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and joy while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. Ann Joy, and I'm so excited to bring you episode 35 on mental health in Black history. We always talk about Black History Month. That's what February is all about. And this has been a beautiful month. But let's talk about mental health in Black history. We don't tend to talk about that. What's the history of mental health for Black people? Why is there a stigma? Where does this stigma come from? Why do we think of mental illness and mental health this way? Why don't we promote wellness in ourselves and others? Why are we uncomfortable talking about certain things? Why do we feel that way? So let's kind of dig into that history and talk through it. And what I want you to think about while you're listening is a call to action. What can you do to help stop the stigma, to help silence that stigma, to end the stigma? Whatever word you want to use, what can you do to help end the stigma against mental health, mental illness in the Black community? In general, it affects us all. But like I said, the mission is to break down that stigma in the Black community, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So that's why I say Black people, but we all need it. Mental health matters for us all, right? So anyhow, this month I've been posting somewhat, maybe some might say alarming posts. I mean, I was thinking to myself, wow, should I post this? But that's just the point. Breaking down the stigma means promoting the awareness and getting that education out there. And the idea was that I said, there must be some figures or historical figures in Black history that has struggled from mental illness. There must be, right? A lot of people have experienced mental illness to some respect or have promoted mental health to some respect. So that has to mean that in history, there have been people that experience mental disorders. It was just so interesting how easy it was to find who has struggled from mental illnesses. Martin Luther King. Wow. I had to fact check before I posted that he had experienced 2 suicide attempts before the age of 12. Unfortunately, as a child psychiatrist, I actually hear about a lot of kids under the age of 12 who are suicidal or have self-harm or have attempted. So when I saw that, yes, it was alarming because it's like, well, Martin Luther King, wow. But it was also like, yeah, kids struggle too. And, some people think, well, is it for attention? Is it this, that, and the other? It could be based on trauma. It could be based on depression, bipolar, a lot of different things. And then you wonder, well, Martin Luther King must have went through a lot. There's not much out there about what or why he was struggling with what he was struggling with. But thankfully, he got whatever help he got. I mean, I don't know if he got the help, but we obviously know that he grew up to be a monumental figure in history that was very much an advocate for our rights. So that just goes to show that you might be going through something, but you're here for a reason. You have a purpose. You never know. So if you're experiencing suicidal thoughts, stop, get that help that you need. The crisis line is 988. You can chat 988. You can call, you can text. So get the help that you need. All right. So there's obviously a reason why there's this stigma in the Black community. It comes way back. I mean, when you think about slavery and mental health, and a lot of this, like I said, I do research for these things and I'm learning myself. So some of these things I'm learning so I can present to you all. And then some of the things just as a psychiatrist, I just kind of know about. And then some things are just my opinion. I mean, I can share my opinion. It's the point of having my own podcast. Huh? So anyway, slavery and mental health. Enslaved Africans were often misdiagnosed with a fictitious disease called drapetomania. And drapetomania meant that they had a mental illness that caused them to run away. So white people, their masters, whoever you want to call them, they actually was trying to figure out and research how they can label a black slave with mental illness to say, okay, they're running away. They must have some type of a mental illness because they're running away. They're not doing what we want them to do. And they tried to look for ways to treat it. I didn't get that far as to how they treated it, but you can only imagine. So, mental health in Black history goes that far back in Africans actually being misdiagnosed. And even now, today, there's misdiagnosis. Uh, Black people in general are misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, with bipolar. And I know in my practice, I try my best to do a lot of undiagnosis with when I see bipolar or schizophrenia, because a lot of times people act a certain way because of trauma, and it's not necessarily because of bipolar or schizophrenia. So I digress. So there's the slavery phase, and then after that, there's the post-emancipation and segregation phase, right? So during that time, everything was segregated, so there was limited access to mental health services due to the segregation, due to racism. So mental health issues were ignored and treated as a criminal behavior sometimes. So when you think about it, if going back way back, our mental illness was ignored, we weren't allowed access to treatment, then we just kind of like just tucked it under like, well, I guess I can't get treatment for this issue, or maybe it's not an issue at all. So therefore I don't get treatment, and obviously the severe effects of not getting treatment happens, and that's where it leads to, issues on the job, issues with relationships, all the way down to psychosis, experiencing voices, suicidal thoughts. And that's what happens when you're not treated. So after the post-emancipation and segregation phase, civil rights movement. I mean, there was a little bit more increased awareness about mental health and stigma, but stigma still continued around mental health. Activists faced immense stress and trauma, and without support. So we had our advocates around that time trying to help and stand for us. There was Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks around the civil rights movements. And as you can see from my post this month, and as I just mentioned, they experienced mental health issues as well. Malcolm X struggled from depression, anxiety. Rosa Parks suffered from mental illness. And we don't know if that's directly related because of just everything that was going on. I mean, of course you're going to be stressed out if you're over here trying to change segregation and turn that around and being a part of the civil rights movement. I mean, everybody was probably stressed out and dealing with something back then. So it's almost understandable. But why haven't we actually heard about those things? Think about that. And in recent decades, as there's growing awareness and advocacy for mental health in the Black community, there's still persistent disparities in access and the treatment quality. So as time goes on, that quality of treatment goes higher, and as the stigma goes down. So these historical events and these figures that I'm speaking of, they lead to certain attitudes that the Black community might have because of what has happened. So there's this continued mistrust. There's a historical mistrust of psychiatry in general, mental illness, the whole field, against Black people, that contributes to the ongoing mistrust of mental health professionals. And a lot of times in practice, I might have a patient who says, well, I really want a Black psychiatrist. And some of them feel like, I want a Black psychiatrist. I'm like, hey, you don't have to feel shy to say that. It's okay. And when they see faces like their faces, it makes them feel comfortable to come and get treatment. I mean, there's Black therapy for Black girls, therapy for Black women, there's therapy for Black men. There's definitely different sites that you can go to find a Black professional. And it helps when we have more people in the field to help break down that stigma when they see people who look like them. So that reduces that mistrust that you might see that's come from this historical misuse of psychiatry in general. Stigma and silence, of course. There's a cultural emphasis on I'm strong, I'm resilient, and that could discourage discussing your mental health and seeking help. So when you think about Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, MLK, they were probably battling in silence. I've never heard a speech of him talking about his mental illness or them talking about their mental illness. It was all about, oh yeah, we bounce back, which is good. I definitely advise resilience. And of course, I talk about the journey to joy. So I talk about those things because those are end points, but not to the point where you want it to hinder you from being able to talk about it. Like, oh, I have to be strong. So let me not talk about that I'm sad. Let me not talk about that I'm weak. Let me not talk about that I'm feeling anxious and scared and paranoid because I'm supposed to be strong. Black men feel that way. Black women feel that way. We feel like we got to be so strong. We're the moms, we're the wives, we're the teachers, we're the friends that are there that people lean on us. They can't see my weakness. It's okay to show your weakness. So we need to not suffer in silence and break down this stigma. So again, ask yourself the question while you hear me talking, what can you do to end the stigma? You can play a role in this. The role of religion. I love religion. I am religious. I am a Christian. I'm spiritual. So, of course, I'm not knocking any religious community. However, having strong religious communities, like in the Black community, it can be a source of support and also a barrier to seeking mental health treatment outside of the church because there's this known conception that, well, pray about it. You can do better. And yeah, you can pray about it. Yeah. And sometimes the answer to that prayer is seek help, get a doctor, get a psychiatrist, get a therapist. But that is a conception that we've had that, based on historical perspectives, we get continued mistrust, the stigma, the silence, the role of religion can lead to more stigma. Advocacy and change. So, our influential figures like BB Moore Campbell, I posted about her. Organizations like NAMI, that's the National Alliance of Mental Illness, they're working to destigmatize mental illness and improve access to care in the Black community. There's SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration. They're out there giving grants to individuals who want to enter the field. They're doing research. They're giving all kinds of grants out there. So there's lots of different communities these days that are trying to work towards advocacy and getting rid of this stigma because we got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of it. So when it comes to mental health in Black history, I do want to talk about these legendary figures in mental health. I mentioned MLK, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. There was also Frederick Douglass that I wrote about a post, who he also suffered from mental illness. It's not widely discussed. And I'm sure it wasn't treated in their time, largely due to the stigma surrounding mental health and the lack of understanding and resources available. So, in the context of the civil rights movement, the focus was on leadership, resilience, as I mentioned, and the fight for racial equality rather than personal mental health struggles. It's kind of like we got a bigger whole thing to focus on at this point. We can't focus on our personal struggles, but really, it's okay to focus on the community's mental health too. And of course, now that we're not battling civil rights issues, we can start to focus on our individual. And that's really, you got to focus on yourself first. For Martin Luther King, any personal struggles with mental health were largely kept private, overshadowed by his public persona and the immense pressure he faced as a leader. So it was mainly like, yay, he's doing great things, which he was. So, but it was hard to believe, like, yeah, he actually went through this. And similarly, Malcolm X's experience included trauma, stress from his activism, personal life, and the constant threats against him. Then there's that. You know, you got threats against you because you're trying to stand up for your community, for your race. Yeah, that's going to lead to mental health issues. But it wasn't publicly addressed as a mental health issue. That's the thing. And Rosa Parks, known for her quiet strength, also faced significant stress and pressure and depression, which likely impacted her mental health, right? But this aspect of her life was not a focus of public discourse. And, you know, like I said, as I was posting these, I'm like, am I outing these people? Am I embarrassing them even though they're already gone? No, it's just kind of getting out there that we all suffer from mental health issues at some point. And just awareness about we got to get help because we've all done it. We've all experienced it. And it's okay to some level. It doesn't mean that everybody needs a psychiatrist, everybody needs a therapist. Well, everybody could use a therapist, to be honest, whether it's for goal setting or depression or whatever. I think anybody could use a counselor or a therapist. But my point is that not everybody needs to be hospitalized. Just because you need to talk to somebody, it's not a sign of weakness. It's just a sign of, oh, I could use some support. I could use some help. But during their time, mental health in the African American community was taboo. Seeking help was often a sign of weakness or a luxury that many just could not afford. I mean, there's that whole thing about the access to care and insurance, the systemic barriers to accessing mental health care, including discrimination, the lack of cultural competent care, meaning people who understand your culture. So that goes back to why usually Black people want someone that looks like them, who understands their systemic struggles, the systemic oppression, as well as just can kind of get them. Like, I want somebody who gets me. And then there's, of course, the economic disparities. So there was a strong emphasis on community resilience, self-reliance, relying on yourself. I got to be able to do this, and just being that strong person, which discouraged having an open discussion about your mental health struggles. The perception and treatment of mental health struggles have evolved since then, luckily, with an increased awareness and advocacy and efforts to destigmatize mental health issues. So let's get on board with that. Let's destigmatize it. Think about what happens when we're silent or when someone is silenced. If you say, oh, they're just doing it for attention, or oh, there's nothing wrong with them, or oh, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with you. Why are you acting that way? What happens when someone's silenced? What happens when someone feels stigmatized against? My last post, and this was the hardest post, was about Stephen Twitch Boss. Oh my goodness. When I first watched So You Think You Can Dance, that was like literally my favorite show. I love dance. I thought my second career was going to be dance. I was like, I want to be a doctor dancer, a dancer doctor, but I didn't end up doing that. I did take a ballet class in med school. I was able to do that. Anyhow, watching So You Think You Can Dance was my way of like, yes, I'm a dancer. So I live vicariously through them. And Twitch was just like the most amazing dancer to me. And he was a hip hop dancer, but just seeing him go through the different styles, and that's what they put everybody through. It's like, you got to be able to do contemporary, you got to be able to do ballet, you got to be able to do salsa and tango and all that stuff, despite you just being a hip hop dancer. But he was amazing. I followed him wherever he went. Of course, he ended up being on Ellen, and it was a shock. It was such a shock to everyone when he died by suicide. December 2022, as a 40-year-old. He had a beautiful family. The family still there. They're survived by a beautiful wife and 3 children, I believe. And so it's a wonder. Obviously, I don't know if he did suffer in silence. Maybe he was getting help. But how it's perceived, of course, is it seems like for someone who's out in the limelight that you're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to show that you're amazing still. You're not supposed to talk about it. And I was looking at his post on Instagram, like, I think it was a month before he passed away. He was saying stuff like, oh, happy anniversary to my wife, oh, this, like great things. So you never know what someone is suffering about. But what was it about the stigma and the way we portray mental illness that made him feel like he couldn't get the help, if that was the case? There are people who are able to get the help, and the treatment doesn't work, or they don't have the right therapist, or they're not on the right medication. You just have to keep getting working with the patient, working with your doctor until you get the right diagnosis or you get the right medication and the right treatment. And it's just all of the above. It's not just, oh, you need to be on a medication and that's it, or oh, you need therapy and that's it. It's there's other things too. I believe in the journaling. We always talk about the self care, self love, self compassion, exercise, dancing, music, all those things that can help with your treatment for your mental illness. But yeah, it's just so sad. It's just so sad when you find that out. And just so you know, the reason I say died by suicide is because we got to get away from saying that person committed suicide as if it's like a horrible thing. They committed murder. It's not that, because that adds to the stigma. Oh, they committed suicide. They died by suicide. We don't say you committed neuropathy and your kidneys went bad and you died. If you have like severe diabetes and you have to get your feet amputated all of a sudden. We don't treat them like, oh, that kind of thing. So we say died by suicide. That is the proper way to say that. What we got to get comfortable talking about uncomfortable things. I'm in this field because I don't mind talking about uncomfortable things. So, yeah, let's talk about it. What can you do to help destigmatize mental health issues? And there's other people that we know about in mental health, but I'm not going to mention Kanye's name because I don't want him coming after me. Or he can, because I wouldn't mind interviewing him. Wait, did I just mention his name? I just mentioned his name. Anyhow, there's a lot of people who are out there where you kind of know that there's some mental health issues, but then they get the stigmatized against. There's jokes about them like, oh, that's just bipolar. Oh, I wonder if he's on his medications. So it's like, well, woo, if that's how society treats me, why am I going to talk about it? So this is why we should not treat people poorly for actually talking about what's going on. I mean, when you think about it, Kanye seemed to start acting a certain way when his mom passed away, and that's a trauma. And that's a trauma. I'm not his doctor. I'm not saying I know things. Let me say that. I'm not liable. But trauma can definitely lead to mental illness that may not have come out if it wasn't triggered by trauma, or it was always there and it was going to come out eventually and the trauma triggered it. But trauma, loss, that's huge. So getting comfortable talking about our trauma, our oppression, our abuse, our stress, what makes us feel weak is important, because when we talk about it, we're not going to hold it in and it explodes later and we end up in the hospital. So pioneers in mental health and Black mental health, like B.B. Moore Campbell, she's an author, journalist, and she had a platform that highlighted mental health issues in the African American community, and she was the one that established the National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, which is actually when I had my first episode during July. So thank you, B.B. Moore Campbell. It is because of you that I started my podcast. She is no longer with us though, but talking to her in spirit. Taraji P. Henson, her father experienced mental illness, so she found the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation. So we've got a lot of stars out here who are actually doing things to help advocate against the stigma around mental health issues in the Black community. Bassi Ikpi, a Nigerian American writer and mental health advocate, founder of the Seaway Project, a global nonprofit dedicated to promoting mental health awareness among people of African descent. Charlemagne the God, media personality, of course, and author who openly discusses his experiences with anxiety and mental health. So the more people we have talking about their own thing, and that's why I highlighted Mike Epps, because and I like it when the comedians can talk about it, because you're listening to it and you don't realize you're listening to some serious stuff, but you're laughing. But he's just like, I got a psychiatrist and a therapist. And he just made it so comfortable and so normal. Like, yeah, I do. Just like I got a primary care doctor. Nobody flinches like, What are you doing with a primary care doctor? You mean you go and get a physical once a year to get your heart and lungs checked? You get your prostate checked? Whoa, you got a colonoscopy because you turned 50. Nobody thinks about that. So it should be just a normal, simple thing. Yeah, I got a psychiatrist. Yeah, I have a therapist. Yeah, I'm on medication. I'm on an antidepressant. Let's talk about it. Let's make that normal. Be transparent, right? So there's others, Algie Smith, actor and singer, who's been open about their or his mental health struggles, working to destigmatize mental health through public speaking and social media. Kid Cudi, musician, has helped break down the stigma of mental health in the music industry among his fan base. Simone Biles, even world champion gymnast, prioritized her mental health over a competition at the Tokyo Olympics. So it's kind of like, she reached her threshold where she realized I need to take care of my mental health. And that's good to recognize that. Jennifer Lewis has a diagnosis of bipolar. I actually don't think I knew that. But she advocates for mental health awareness and encourages discussions about help, mental health, and seeking help and treatment. And Jay-Z talks about therapy and its benefits. Michelle Williams, we know who that is, singer, member of Destiny Child, destigmatizing mental health. So there are people out there doing that. We've changed from the era of slavery into emancipation and segregation and civil rights, and then now we're getting better. We're definitely better as a society. But what can you do? You listening? I hear you. I see you. You hear me. What can you do to destigmatize mental health and mental illness? That could be just starting to talk about your struggles, or that could be knowing the resource 988. Call that crisis line if you're going through something. That could be knowing about lines like Georgia Crisis Access Line. Just knowing where to send someone. Or it could be asking someone, hey, what's going on? You okay? You look a little down. You missed work yesterday. Just asking. Break the cycle of this destigmatization. We got to stop this. We got to stop this. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I mean, I could just stay with my day job one-on-one and just try to save one family at a time, which is good. It's fulfilling. But I also want to get my voice out there to the masses. So what can you do to break down the stigma? Next week, episode 36, I have my brother-in-law, Kenny. He is going to talk about his struggles with mental health and how soccer has saved him. So that will be called Kicking Out the Stigma. So I'm going to post that as pre-recorded. I'm going to post that next week. And hopefully I'll have someone else talking in March about their mental health struggles. And we're going to be talking about stigma a little more. But in general, just promoting wellness, resilience, authenticity, and your journey to joy. Thank you for listening. Have a great week.